by Sports. Jacob Wilson is here today, and Garrett Ross running the mothership as well. Garrett, do you have the odds of the 4 teams that are right now locked in at 1, 2, 3, and 4 for the college football playoff? This is something that Brett McMurphy put up based on odds, point spread, that if Georgia played any of these teams, including Ohio State in this list, they would be favored by the least against Michigan. That makes sense. Just barely over Ohio State. And then also TCU, USC, 10, 13 and a half. If Michigan played those same teams, there you see the odds there. TCU 5.5, 9 for USC, and a pick'em game in a repeat match with Ohio State. And if TCU was to play USC, it's the only one left in the mix here, or Ohio State, they would be favored.
No.
Underdogs by 3.5.
No, they'd be favored over USC.
They would be underdogs to Ohio State, and so would USC against Ohio State. But you cannot, and this is some things that fans, you could always find an argument, like all of a sudden, well, our endowment's larger. You cannot pick the college football playoff 1 through 4 based on who would be Vegas's picks to win the game. It's based on what you've earned during the regular season.
Yeah, I think there's already becoming a bit too much Vegas infiltration in college football as it is, and I realize that's a big part of why the sport is as popular as it is the betting side of it. But I think we've got our fill of that at this point. It is interesting to see those lines, though, and I agree with you just on the Vegas thing. Is that's not why you should have. We should play games because the spread says that this team would win. We shouldn't have games as a result of that. Like that's obviously very silly. But yeah, it's interesting to see where Vegas, who's for the most part usually pretty dead on of where they kind of see this going, and I don't think there's many of those, if any of those, that I disagree with. I think I would probably lean not necessarily spread wise, but as far as outcomes go, yeah, I think I'd be pretty much on board with all of those.
Yeah, I think all of them make sense.
Yeah, and I think, too, that there's this argument that I've seen, obviously on social media with the expanded playoff news of, there's a lot of, I think there's disingenuous arguments like, oh, this is going to be so great when Georgia blows out. I saw somebody actually bring up like UTEP. They blow out UTEP in the first round. Well, one, not everybody's going to play all the games because Georgia would have a bye, but y'all just don't mention that. And two, UTEP is really going to make the playoff. Like, they got more of a chance now than they'll ever have in their lifetimes. I don't see what's wrong with that. They'd have to have the greatest season of all time, so they'd probably be, they'd be deserving of it to an extent, but that's not being genuine to say, using UTEP as an example and Georgia as the example of like why you shouldn't have an expanded playoff. Like, we can come up with better reasons for that, like player safety, like compensation, things of that nature. But the whole we shouldn't do this because there will be blowouts is just the lamest argument to me, and just a lazy argument to me as well. If you don't want to see a blowout, then you won't watch. And I don't know, based on ratings, there's plenty of blowouts that still get massive eyeballs because of the brands. I mean, you mean to tell me that like Ohio State, Illinois drawing huge numbers, was that because it was a great game? No, it's because it got huge fan bases. So I don't think that all of a sudden you're going to have people just turn it off because their team is getting blown out in a playoff game. I think that's probably one of the worst arguments that I see in regards to expansion.
Part of their audience also is because it had so much implications on the playoff too. I know you're talking about Michigan,
in general,
Ohio,
yeah.
But I mean, I watched them and I have nothing to do with them because it was a great football matchup and I was looking forward, and you wonder the percentage of how much of that to the 17 million.
But, saying it could be a blowout also creates this kind of ridiculous moving target for, all right, so if Georgia plays Ohio State in the championship game and Georgia beats Ohio State by 42, does that mean Ohio State is no longer deserving of the play? Like, do we have to put them down with UTEP because they would have gotten beaten by the same amount of points? No,
that's one of the
games happen. Like, it's just,
and the thing is
the
they
laziest
just
comments is when, that would be a blowout in anything we talk about.
I'm fine with you being anti-playoff. I'm not totally on board, to be very clear, with the way it's set up right now, although we still don't know a lot of the details. But, I wouldn't have gone directly to 12. I would have started at 8, but I'm not the money grabber, so I understand why they did that. I also don't have to deal with the politics of the bowl reps and all that goes into that. That's something that we as fans, it's like, well, if I were in this company, this is what I would do. And you just totally dismiss the fact that there's other people involved, there's politics involved, there's other, stakes that are involved. It's not as simple as you just get to fantasy book it the way exactly you want to. It's just nobody can do that. So it's never going to be perfect. But, yeah, I just think the worst argument is there's going to be blowouts. Ohio State just got blown out by their rival Michigan. And I understand people say in this new setup that Ohio State would turn around and maybe play Michigan again. And I agree. That's why I'm for the conference championship games going to the wayside so that we can avoid situations like that, although I know that's unlikely because, again, the money-grabbing aspect of this. But there's Ohio State who just got blown out. And, yes, in an expanded playoff, they would still find a way to get in. But they're almost going to find a way to get into this one if enough things break a certain way, right? So, yeah, I mean, TCU would have to lose in embarrassing fashion, but even with their blowout, they're still in. The argument against it is that they would definitely be in this new version is not enough to make me say, yeah, we should just totally scrap this thing.
Yeah, if TCU and Kansas State were in the same position in 2024, and TCU wins the game 30-14, Kansas State's like number 10 right now. Would they get in? I would doubt it.
Probably not.
I would doubt it because you'd have the Big 12 champion, and they would not be one of the top 6 at-large teams. And that's, again, one thing I want to be careful of, and I think it's great we could debate it, the chat room, the text line, just in wherever you are in general, is that not everybody's happy with the expansion. Not everyone's happy with the number. Not everyone's happy with some of the ways it's okay. But we've been waiting, and I say me, and the last thing I'm going to do is start picking it apart about, well, wait a minute. Now I'm thrilled because forever and ever and ever, how many times would Florida State had a better chance, and they had chances to win more than just the national title in 1993?
Well, considering that they had 15 straight top 4 finishes.
There you go.
They would have been, if there was a 14 playoff, they would have been in it 15 straight years.
They would have been in it, let's say, a bunch. And my favorite program, but it doesn't count. I'm just saying. So I'm happy it's here. Doesn't mean that it's perfect, but man, it's better than what it was. And then again, maybe it's not. Maybe just the old days of the polls were fine, and there was nothing wrong with having 2 national champions on occasion during each season.
And that's the risk that the college football executives run. That's their gamble that they're taking, is they're going to make money and people are still going to watch, as Bill Hancock told us last year. Basically, screw everybody. We're going to do what we want, and people are going to watch anyways. That boils down to his message, basically. So, there's definitely money grabs going on. There's definitely some concerns. I definitely understand those that are preferential to 4. But, at the same time, I am excited to see the doors that this does open up. And if, in fact, it comes to a point where, the regular season is watered down, whatever that looks like, then I'll acknowledge that. I'll be the first to stand up and say, I don't know this is the best move, but I feel like this was inevitable when they started the playoff to begin with. I don't think there was a scenario where they were going to stay at 4 for 100 years, even though they stayed at just the championship game for a really long time. Once they saw the money coming in and the ratings coming in and just the opportunities at their disposal, this was coming. It was just an argument over what exactly it was going to look like. And again, I am not in favor of the 12, but that's something that we'll see how it works.
We were all in favor of expansion. We just didn't. Doesn't mean you have to agree on the number. Craig